hello and welcome to Global Custodian's Great European Sub-Custody Roundtable, a conversation that seems like it's going to touch on the challenges and opportunities in equal measure today. We are truly excited to have such a distinguished lineup of speakers here today, so thank you all for taking part in what I think is going to be a brilliant discussion. I think we'd all agree that Europe faces a pivotal moment right now as it readies for a period of great change in both market structure, technology, as well as a shift in the landscape as a whole. I think there are things to fix, there are things to get right in the future, and possibly some lessons to learn from other regions as well. But ultimately, I think it's still a region of great promise. It's got a diverse range of players, and evidently has the desire to make improvements to be competitive and keep up pace on an international stage. And what I'm really excited about for this conversation is that we're going to take a range of topics that are usually talked about in silos and highlight the interconnectedness of all of it. So again, very much looking forward to this. And where better to start than T+1? I think 2 years away. It feels like a bit of a false sense of security, as does the occasional readiness report with various statistics, but I would just love to hear about the unique challenges that Europe is facing, where you see the level of industry readiness and the crucial work that needs to be done in the build up to October 2027. So Marie-France, let's get us started.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Good question. So first of all, October 2027 or the 11th of October 2027 seems a bit far. It's just about 500 business days away. So pretty short when you look at it, and lots to be done. The roadmap to T+1 in terms of readiness, listen, the industry will be ready. We will be ready. We've been obviously advised that it wouldn't be not pushed back, at least at the moment. And there is a game plan, right? The game plan currently is 2025. Review your processes, review your operational setup, identify all of the frictions that there might be within your technology and operational model, and address these gaps. And this is to be done by every single actors and every single players in the chain, right? And then afterwards, 2026, implement what needs to be implemented, and then 2027 test and start. Now, the one thing about the unique challenges, there are actually pretty quite a few. First off, I will say, if we have to look at our European landscape, it is obviously fragmented, right? We're talking a multiplicity of CSDs, of jurisdictions, of markets, and in ways, multiple CCPs. So it's not the US, right? The US, on top of which was T+1 US was driven by DTCC. Here, our market infrastructures are being advised with all of us the direction to take. So it's not necessarily that they had this on top of their agenda to start with and as a priority. Notably, when we look at all of the changes that are happening in Europe at the same time, if we have to look at the changes in tax with Germany and Belgium, if we have to look at the projects that Euronext is getting itself into, and so on and so forth. So that fragmentation and the number of players is obviously one of the challenges, but also what's the clarity that we still need to get in order to move towards ourselves being ready and our clients being ready. We are still waiting on a number of topics from the CSDs and market infrastructures. So that's another challenge in that readiness aspect that we want to target. And then it really will be our collective engagement. And the collective engagement is not only that of the custodians, it's not, but the whole market infrastructure. So again, back to the level of fragmentation, is everyone going to be ready? Most certainly at the same time for us to adapt and our clients and the rest of the players to adapt. This is currently what we're waiting on.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other element of that as well is we've got the kind of fragmenting element of it, but then there's also the consideration around things like funding. And if people actually thought about that, and that's another difference within the US as well. I think that was still an issue in the US, even though there was just that single market. And the question around funding is just amplified in Europe then. On top of that, and a lot of the conversations that are still happening again is actually how will the funding work, and have we thought about it? And I don't think the asset managers can assume that the global custodians are going to immediately step in to do that. That coupled with looking at the mismatch between the settlement cycles of funds, between T+1 and then T+3, 730 for some cases, I think is going to be another element that I kind of keep raising, because I feel that it's perhaps not fully appreciated, that there's going to have to be considerations made of this. And I think also maybe taking into that view of where to date, most of the time intraday settlement has been free. I'm not sure that that can continue to be the case if it's going to be, at enormous levels. That's another element of it that I think as well as a challenge.
If we talk about challenge, we have many, because we have done a great job, I think, in Europe, being able to produce a report in 6 months, put all the people around, discussions, many people in that conversation. So nobody probably had the hope at the beginning of the process that we will be able to produce this report in Europe in such a short time frame. UK was the first mover. Switzerland is moving on as well. We have published in the Swiss market the recommendations report a couple of weeks ago. And challenge is that we are moving many different jurisdictions at the same time. So imagine the migration date, moving UK, all the Eurozone and Switzerland at the same time. So, I mean, just they are big words. So we have done a great job, I think, as a community. The FMIs has supported a lot the change and the conversations and the awareness session. So first milestone from my point of view is done, but we have the important part already, because we need to analyze the gaps internally, and clearly it's a matter of having the right conversations, the right analysis, and the right talks with your stakeholders, close stakeholders, because as you mentioned, this change is affecting all the value chain. From the clearing, from the trading, clearing and settlement, because this is not about settlement, but as well upwards between you, your clients, the client or your client, and you have to be sure that all your processes internally are well squared, are analyzed, and it's big tax. It's a big work to be sure that we are already prepared. So I think we are going on track, let's say, today at the moment, but many things to be done in the coming months. So
I agree. I mean, look, the industry will be ready. I think that was a point well made. But a key learning from the US and amplified given the complexities that we're talking about across the European markets is to really start that engagement, particularly with our clients much earlier in the cycle. 500 business days is not a lot of time. And we're already starting conversations around match and settlement rates, looking at processes, looking at the full operating model and all of the components that need to change. It's like definitely not too early to really be focused on that with your clients.
And on this front, education is going to be key.
Yes.
But the education, the more global players would already have started with a lot of automation on their end, right? There's already a warm up, quote unquote, within India and then Canada, the US, et cetera, et cetera. But the smaller player, the more regional players that are not necessarily part of associations or directly in the market might still consider that so far a lot of the shielding has been done by their providers, and fair enough, will continue doing it. But you cannot have, and Andrew Douglas says this regularly, and he's absolutely right. You can't be complacent and think that, because the rest has happened, you can just let it happen.
It would be a misconception,
It
right?
would totally
to follow
be a misconception.
the US and just think because of that one marketplace, it's just going to flow out into the multitude of depositories and exchanges.
But the buy-side clients have a lot of, the chain includes multiple providers. Any change that will happen, well, your distribution, your manco, obviously the asset managers. So it is your transfer agent. It is pretty significant, and there will be ripple effect down the line. So it's not just us having, as an industry, or direct market participants or market infrastructure, to educate all of the actors down the chain, but also help and enable our clients to educate and accompany their own clients and partners as well. There is something we have not mentioned, is that in Europe we have CSDR, and there are penalties for fail. And these penalties can add up pretty quickly. And that is not just an increase in costs, it also risk and reputation. And we just want things to happen well. So back to your point, yes, education is key.
And in some ways, CSDR, might help us in so much as it's kind of built into the ethos to be really cognizant of settlement rates in this market. So in some ways, maybe that's a catalyst. But yeah, the repercussions are much higher. Sorry.
No. The clients are exactly comfortable with the custodians taking on the onus of cleaning up all this mess. Europe has had the benefit of reading the scripts from the US and India and China, but this sequel has the complexity of multiple jurisdictions, right, and multiple CSDs. And like you rightly said earlier, DTCC was actually the champion in the US market, but in the European market, you got multiple champions, and they're not all, they're all collaborating, but they're not necessarily on the same page. I think the one thing we want to stress to the client point, especially the buy side, is they may do a ton of their services with a particular custodian who offers multiple services, outsourced middle office, fund accounting, transfer agent, but sometimes that's with other third parties, to your point. And so you think about the standing instructions, and sometimes those get updated. They switch service providers. That isn't maintained. It is the gap outside of the four walls of the custodian with their clients and who they're using in the market. That's where the things are falling apart. I think for all the sunny day scenarios, we're very ready. But what I've personally seen in some cases, certainly no one in this room is in the US play of the T+1 move. There was labor thrown. And I think in the good news afterwards, they've automated a lot of those things afterwards. But when you take the plus or X times 20 different markets or whatever, in this case, that they may not be the reality without the collaboration of the buy-side clients. And when I say buy-side, it's not necessarily the asset owner themselves. It's the buy-sides who are committing the trades. One of the things that we uncovered in this is how do you create incentives for them to participate actively? And what we've been honing in on is the order management systems of these buy-side clients, because these portfolio managers want to ensure they're ready to trade in every given market for every different counterparty for every type of trading instrument. And I know Europe's focused on security specifically, and you got to the funding point, so we're going to have a fun time on that topic, I'm sure, in a second. But when we cross the assets and look at FX and derivatives, and we say, in reality, this is all kind of like asset class agnostic. Surely securities is driving this. The portfolio managers can help drive that change. So I think what we're doing here is, and we're working with partners like yourselves, is to incentivize those clients to look at it from that standpoint. That's where you really get them championing the changes that are needed. Because I guarantee all the folks around this table and the other custodians not in the room are certainly ready and know what they need to do, but they need those partners to play with.
But you're talking about the front end, the pre-trade environment, right? And absolutely, it needs to be end to end. That roadmap, especially at the small and medium financial institution, they really need help to echo that. And we need to think about it. T+1 is somewhat playing catch up on the US, right? This is going to be a journey. There will be a future evolution of the industry. So it's really interesting times.
There's a couple other things if I could hit on, and I'd love, by the way, push back me because I have opinions, but it doesn't make it so. But like Swift is the bare minimum standard, right? And we're doing work with Swift. But and I'm going to take a real example with some of these large investment managers. They're doing these block trades that are not associated to necessarily a beneficial owner. And then they allocate to 100 different funds. Okay. And the problem is for those 100 funds on that one trade on a particular security, you have 100 different Swift messages that are sent out. And then what happens is they may have an outsourced middle office doing some of that work, and that outsourced middle office is doing it, I don't know, 6 p.m. New York time as opposed to Europe time. And so those Swift messages come out of a sequence, and you guys are the recipient of these messages that are not in sequence, and it doesn't make sense on how you're supposed to settle it. Never mind that there's like real-time issues on, compliance and other things that are going on with those specified accounts. What we're looking at is saying, okay, how do we create a protocol agnostic solution? What do I mean by this is if a client maybe is on Swift, but others are using some APIs and in combination with Swift, and then you have local custodians who are purely Swift. They're not using some of the newer technologies. How do you link this all together so that you can get real-time messaging to support and settle your clients? That's one question I really have around the room. We have a thought around this, and this is where we look at it from before you trade. Do you normalize the data first for each firm, and so you understand their data structure, so that you can actually map that later in the post-trade arena where you're settling the accounts? The other thing is we've actually explored with Swift a little bit is this UTI concept, which I know everyone, the custodians just want someone to publish it. They're happy to pass. At least what I hear is that custodians are happy to pass the UTI back and forth. So how do you create that incentive? Because that is one way we solve the problem at the last mile, which is some of these local custodians that are using Swift who are not going to be able to amalgamate these larger trades, and then getting it to the CSDs, right, in a way that they can understand it. So we think UTI is one option. It's not the only one, but certainly that helps solve laggards or players who do not want to upgrade beyond Swift, right? And that's how it, but then this creates optionality where a buy-side client could you even get to DLT, someone else comes through API, someone else comes through Fix, and then a few players are still on Swift. And this is where you're creating a glue between the friction points is what I'm getting at. Does that make sense? Because everyone stresses standards, right?
Yeah.
But we know not everyone's adopt the same standards.
Yeah. I mean, and I think for that, a lot of it is coming back just to that education point as well, and having the conversation. How are you planning on approaching this? What are you going to do? How will that fit into the infrastructure as it stands today? And then seeing if there are going to be those fractions between that then we can look to fill. I mean, I think from our perspective, we work in an industry where people still send faxes, like we're talking about APIs, like there are faxes. So I absolutely agree with you that we'll need to look at that end. I think we're also looking at it at the very, very historical end of let's get rid of faxes. Yes, exactly.
Shield my eyes.
I know, it's horrifying.
No, but it's true that the smallest participant normally are the ones who are less developed in terms of technology. Yeah. And there is an important point, which is budget.
Yes.
Because just dedicating time to analyze your own processes internally, you need a budget for that. You need a team, you need an expertise, you need documentation, internal documentation to double check what is in, what is out, what are your counterparts, how you interact with them. And all of this is time, is very consuming in terms of resources. So one of the topics that are part of the awareness or being everybody around the table talking about T+1 is internal work with your own organization to realize and buy internally that this is important and that this is an opportunity if you invest on it to improve your processes, to increase the STP levels, but you need to act quickly, because time is running, and in certain firms there is a lot of work to do.
It's a huge amount. In terms, one of the things that I think of it is that I think that there's a number of those very small firms who over the last years have just maybe an extra headcount or just kind of just managed to get through it feels like that we're now at a point where that's not really going to cut it. And actually, I don't know how they're going to be able to manage as we move into more accelerated settlement. And actually, what will that mean for those smaller players who can't invest? And so for our clients, like, are you with the right partners who can invest? But then also the smaller clients of ours, how are you thinking about addressing that? Because if not now, I think that you'll have missed the boat, and that's definitely a concern.
And it's a good point on the runway as well. So, 2 years out, if you really start thinking about it now, you do still have time to reimagine how you work and make the investments. It's when you start to come up against the timelines that people start throwing labor at it. You just start kind of amplifying your manual processes. And at some point, you do kind of reach a breaking point on how sustainable that is.
And if you break it into like just the cost of Europe, we've talked about infrastructure change, educational change, then CSDR came up. Like there's a lot of cost to the European capital markets, and that's even before we think about the industry and how expensive it is compared to a US markets or some of the infrastructure. So we've got to get more competitive. We've got to invest early, as you suggest, but really ramp it up so that we have a very forward-looking capital markets regime that's harmonized and really drives investment into the EU bloc.
So there's a couple of points I'd like to rebound on, because it's really a good discussion. A lot has been said. So the one on investing, and yes, there's definitely a lot of investments. And again, going back to the European market, some markets are T2S, some markets are not T2S. We've got 14 currencies we know of. It's challenging. And then each market has their own specificities, right? So it's not just the question of investing, it's investing as each market has their own. Now, probably now is the time for each firm, whilst we're looking at their technological platforms, their operational model, their operational processes, to also consider for the smaller ones, which one can they outsource? Who can they partner with, so that all of that bearing of the costs is not necessarily poured on them, right? And how can you also probably consolidate certain aspects of your activity in order to increase efficiencies on your end? So it's for everyone to review. But the other point I'd like to touch on is the one on, the UIT, the static data, the golden source, and the standards. Yes, we do need standards, but we also need standards not just for the post rate. And by that, I mean, what is the golden source? What data, what right data do we have to put in where, at what level, as early on as the trading and execution, so that there is no... Sometimes the information is there, it's just not in the right place. And boom, right? And that creates delays and then friction. And so what type of standards, without going into too heavy investments, can already be outlined, whereby as early on as the front office, there is the right information to say, okay, you know what? My assets are here and not there. So that down the line, and you're getting goes to cut off in the settlement cycle, no one's getting wait a minute, we need to realign, we need to find. So how can we build up this golden source that will be easily accessible and used? So that connection between the front office and the back office, that communication flow has to increase drastically as well.
It's more about tracking the digital obligation where things need to settle is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
The analogy I always use is, because we came from a place of faxes, it's just true. If the faxes are no different than the spreadsheets and the batch processes that we do, and because when we used to settle in 5 days, 3 days, now 2 days, and in 2 days, we used 1 day to clean up everything so we could settle. Okay, that's the reality of what we're dealing in. We're not doing what smartphones do, which is there's only one LinkedIn version of John Watkins. There's not like 7 of them because there's 7 smartphones. It's all pointing to one repository, to your point about the golden source. But you can't say that there needs to be one place because not everyone's going to adopt the same thing. What you have to have is, and this is where the interoperability plays. So here's the challenge between the front office and the back end. Because the front office trades with an 8-digit code, which is meaningless. It hides who you're trading on behalf of, Berkshire Hathaway or whatnot, because they don't want the market to move against them. But behind that, it has Emily's full name, her social security number, address. But you don't want that passed as part of trading because you won't get the best price. The price will move. The machine just reads an 8-digit code. And again, it hides who you're trading on behalf of. But that gets expressed later in post-trade. And there's a gap. This is why there isn't memory between what happens before the trade, which is you're doing your KYC checks and everything, and you're like, what? Surprised in post-trade, it all changes because we're not continuously checking that information. So the idea here is there are solutions out there. It's about market infrastructure. CSDs are playing a role in supporting this. We're talking to several CSDs in the European market. And then educating those front office buy-side firms to understand the benefits of actually leveraging that information so that we can say, because I find that the custodians we work with, BNP, Citi, BNY, you guys know this already. I'll give you one very good example where this applies. It helps with a ton of settlement issues. The custodian account information is about 80 to 90% of what you need when you set up the accounts to understand how to settle it. It's just something's changed in between. It's the same information any outsourced middle office that's offered by the custodian is needed. There's almost a one-to-one match, as well as fund accounting, but that's less of a concern. The other part that's important is securities lending, right? And that all has the same settlement instructions, or I forgot, collateral management. So when you open up the custodian account, for every single market currency, and the markets are going down to local custodians, you are either creating not only the custodial accounts, the collateral accounts, and the securities lending accounts, right? But what I've seen sometimes is that you bifurcate those processes, and then when the client has changed something, maybe one bit's got updated, but the other isn't, and it's all related to the same account. And this is where you're seeing the settlement issues occur. My point is leveraging market infrastructure, just like smartphones, that remembers that data up front so that when something's passed later in a SWIFT message, I use an example. One of the sell sites gave me a SWIFT 304 message, and it had the 8-digit code. And they're like, what's the beneficial owner, right? And they don't know what that 8-digit code is. This is where if you actually map that data beforehand, you can reverse engineer all that. And the only reason why I brought the UTI, and I'm not to suggest that's the only way to solve it, is the amalgamation of multiple SWIFT messages when you get to the local custodians, because those guys who may not upgrade and they're worried about their budgets and if they can do new technologies, and they should look at maybe outsourcing some of the solutions. That is maybe the best way of actually helping to solve some of those issues with them, while everyone else can be using other options. So again, that's how you get to interoperability.
Well, I think I agree with what you're saying, but it depends on the different cut of the custodian. So you have global players, we have regional players, we have sync players, right, who are managing certain networks. But managing that global network with local footprint is really that way to remove latency, remove layers from the custody network, remove redundancy. So there's different ways to cut it, and the requirements for the different players can be different.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing, the variety of clients, setups, interaction is massive, no? So I think each firm needs to analyze and see what the counterparts they interact, what are the best actions to take in place. The thing I like very much about these conversations is that we tend to think that T+1 is a settlement topic.
Yeah.
And it's about CSD's problem, and it's about custodians' problems. And probably the custodians are around the same as CSDs. We are able to settle things in T+0 already today,
Yeah,
without DLC.
Technology is all there, 100%.
Exactly, or T+1. So it's not a big deal. Of course, we have things to do. We have to change our processes. T2S will change the time scale, etc. But we will adapt it, and we will be ready. But each firm needs to analyze. And the nice thing is that this is an opportunity to review your full process from A to Z. And this is an opportunity to see where the inefficiencies are, where the manual tasks are, how do you deal with your faxes, and with you mentioned about the buy side, but clearly it's very much affected because the variety of counterparts they interact on a daily basis. But brokers as well has a great challenge to manage how they receive the information from the trading, route this information to their executors at market level. So the nice thing is that everything is on the table, and everybody is involved, treasurers as well, that where they're doing their job and nobody take care still now, no, that you realize that this guy needs to put the cash at the right timing in the right account, no. So I mean, creating this kind of events internally and externally with your clients is a fantastic opportunity. It's a big challenge, but as well, it's a fantastic opportunity to know more your customers, to review internally your processes, and to figure out where the problems will be and try to resolve them or put at least some actions there to cope with that. Huh?
And you're hearing it from the table here. We spent some time with Giovanni Sabatini yesterday. And he just said the industry, the commitment, he's so reassured by the commitment that this will happen. It's 500 days out. We're going to be ready. But listen to the voices around the table. Everybody is supportive of doing this.
Yeah. Because I don't know you, but when you ask someone else not too obvious to be affected, and you ask them, this change is affecting you. They say, no, not at all. No, it's happened to you. For me, to me, it has happened quite frequently. And are you sure?
Yeah.
So it's really evident. There's a lot of conversations going on in the UK, Switzerland, like you say, with Giovanni in Europe. To this point, you obviously had, the dates were set up. Then the reports came out with guidelines, best practices. Sibos is great because it's happening in October, so it's going to be a year, 2 years out now. It's going to be a year out next year. Remember in the US, obviously DTCC issued a lot of stats, kind of gave you an idea of readiness. Where do we want to be this time next year? Are there metrics out there to measure where we're at in terms of readiness? And is there anything you might hear 12 months from now which would give us a little bit less confidence in preparedness? Because I do like this. Yeah, we would just be ready. Is there anything 12 months out from now that you think could worry you in terms of readiness?
I think one point that Marie-France mentioned is that there are still some uncertainties. No, there are we have already the recommendations. We have quite general indications, but there are important conversations now ongoing in terms of how we will manage the SFT transactions, for instance, how the partial settlement will be implemented across Europe, and we will get potentially an answer in the coming months, but potentially maybe some of those topics remains open for a long time, and the communities needs to adapt independently. The topic is closed or not. So we have to make decisions in the coming months, and I think for me it will be critical because we need to somehow think and be pragmatic in the sense on what is must have, what is a nice to have, what is a very good idea, but probably in 2 years' time we will not solve problems that were there from long time ago. So we need to find the right answers, but with a pragmatic approach, not to look for the perfect setup, but being pragmatic because this is a game in which all of us are in the same boat. So we succeed or we failure, but we need to be very aligned in the way we approach this decision-making process that we are starting now. And probably we will end by mid-2026, because if not, we will have a problem. Okay. But now is the moment of saying, this is a good idea, we will go for it. Or, guys, this is too much, probably there is no feasible to run in this direction, although the debate is very good, and potentially we can still working on these topics after 2027, because there will be a life after October 2027, and probably there are important topics that needs more time or will need more time to discuss. Yeah. But the deadline we have to meet now. So
I think that's such a good point. So my team is sort of across multiple countries in Europe, and it's very interesting. They're there participating in their individual countries, working groups and task forces, and yes, they're looking at them as recommendations, but some of them might not be possible to actually implement in that time. Some of them are, considering even just their operating hours of the exchange. When funding has to be in, because when their central bank has got cut-offs. So I think that that's such a good point is, yes, they will be ready, but there may be things which will be evolving after the 11th of October, because while they're very mindful of the fact that they don't want to be left behind, there are still some considerations that as an individual market, there is an agreement on, and they're not sure that they will reach it by that point. And certainly when we look at things like, in Czech Republic, Poland, etc., there's definitely the will there. I think that is clear, but there are more considerations that just might not be able to be affected by October.
Absolutely.
I think, Fiona, the principle that they built into the EU T+1, that adhere or explain, is an agreed principle. We all want to align to it, but as you say, there's challenges to do that.
Yeah.
But I think the principle is there really to say you must adhere with the framework or explain why you can't and how you minimize the impact to the clients. And that really drives that conversation of adherence and tries to evolve barriers just being built around either private associations or industry/country bias, right? So really trying to take that out of the framework is a real principle that we need the FMIs, the CSDs, and all of the custodians to play with.
Yeah, I think that's certainly from the conversation I was having, that those finding industry bodies who are thinking about, things in that way, because you're right, there will be smaller groups who are perhaps a bit more resistant, but actually, certainly from our perspective, we are wanting to be active participants within those groups where there is that commitment to the change, and actually pushing to find a solution and not accepting that it might be a bit hard for now.
I do think, just going back to your question, I do think if we're sitting here a year from now without some of the answers that you talked about, that will be a giant red flag. In fact, I agree. It's probably, even months before this happens next year. I think there will be a measure around how far have we been able to take the opportunistic chance to be innovative versus the requirement to be pragmatic. So your pragmatic solution can be more innovative if you're more ahead of the game, right? As the window closes, pragmatism means cutting corners, and you shorten the ability to really be innovative. So I think we'll have a good indication this time next year of how much the industry has been able to use this as an opportunity to really elevate the way that we function, to have more standardization across our markets, to have a more common understanding, to have more commonality in terms of the way data flows through the full value chain. As I think you made the point up front, this time next year, I think we'll be really sharpening our view towards our testing cycles.
I was going to go there. If this time next year we do not have clarity on the market infrastructures, on what their plans are, clear cut, that can be followed and applied and adapted in as much as possible a harmonized manner, right, and not multiple levels and multiple speeds, and at the same time, but as well, at this time this year, if we have certainty of testing, and not just the testing platform where providers can test with their clients, what will be possible by when, but a real good testing plan from an end-to-end standpoint. And this is where the US market really had they totally nailed it in allowing everyone to test top to end very early on, and then you can decide, all right, I'm going to test this piece or this piece within our own market infrastructures, right? Testing phase will be okay for that or that, regardless, but the testing will be key, because if this time this year it's still blurry, not really clear, It's gonna be hard.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
milestones were quite crisp, and you kind of had those
Yes.
markers along the
Yeah.
way leading up to May,
Yeah.
which then luckily turned out to be sort of a non-event. Like I think we were all kind of
Yeah.
bearing down for a Y2K that never kind of came to
Exactly.
fruition in a nice way. Yeah.
And the other thing that will get me a bit itchy, if it were to happen, to have the same discussion next year, and you know, still hearing certain clients and participants saying, "Yeah, no, it's fine. We're just waiting," or "It's not for us to do," or "No, we've
Yeah.
decided." I've had, you know, discussions. "Oh, no, it's fine. We've decided there was going to be no investment. It's okay," and that is scaring me. Not for us, because in the grand scheme of things will happen. But again, we're going into ripple effects, and it will be tricky. So Andrew Douglas was mentioning that within the UK, there is an asset management market association, and there's, gosh, I don't want to, not to put the right data, but anyhow, there's a large number of asset managers in the UK, right? I want to say probably between 1.5 to 2.5 thousand. And there is approximately 600 of them that are active participant in the asset management industry. And so what about the rest? How, you know, how close to the market are they? How well and up to date are they? How right? So if we were to have the same level of numbers next year, it will be a bit worse.
But that must be a lesson that's transferable from the US, because you know, there are smaller asset managers in the US, and obviously, like you said, it was a non-event, it was a success.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's not much debate for that. So obviously, they were reached eventually. Is there any lessons to be learned?
The difference is in the US, the buy-side client versus the European one, and the way it's set up. The European buy-side clients work with a lot more providers than the US do, and the providers do not necessarily communicate or translate the information the same way. They might be real time on their end, but work batches on the other one. So if you're waiting for the information from a previous batch, so all of that compressed time. So I'm there with you. There's still some subtleties to it.
I think definitely the. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, this is going to happen the whole time. But
Good engagement.
I'm with Emily actually. Just to make sure, I have no doubts the CSDs and the custodians are going to be testing to whatever degree.
Yeah.
And they will be ready. It's exactly what you just said, which is the participation of certain clients, even in the US market that didn't participate, yet you guys were still able to handle it. And so the idea is I always default to the lowest common denominator and assume that there will be some players not ready. So what do you have to be prepared for that? And certainly the testing will cover it, but if that client is completely still in a out-modeled behavior, how they're actually communicating, I know with one of the particular CSDs in Europe that we're talking to is how do we just equip custodians with capabilities to in real time communicate with that client through even email if must, or through a portal, but interoperable either way, so that in real time we can get this information and authenticate them so that we don't have to do this manual callback. I'll give you two real examples. One, when you have inventory management issues, and so you may have done everything right by the CSDs, but are you going to make your timing? And when you talk about the batch process and your real time maybe with one and not with another party, unless you have some real-time interaction, even if it has to be through email, to be able to get that answer, to know how to resolve it, and then authenticate that individual on switching, let's say, from Euroclear to Clearstream for some type of security, you're not going to be able to. And you amalgamate that across hundreds of trades, not even just one instance. I'm not talking about these like edge cases. We know that happens today, and never mind the penalties around CSDR, right? So that's one thing you want to handle. The second thing is around the settlement instructions themselves, and how the clients want to use them. And sometimes you have a client who has a preferred place of settlement. They don't even have an account there. And you know what the best practice is by Zitzi? Assume the client is correct. So that there, again, if you're all pointing with the cloud to one repository, you understand that, hey, you don't even have an account there, so don't even bother. And we already know that, so let's not waste time, just settle on the one place, and that helps resolve it. And that's what I'm talking about, is equipping you guys around the room with that capabilities for the laggards, or even, if you, as you just said, you may not be able to go for the fancy solution. There should be some innovation on the way. We don't want to find pocket change in the couch, right? We want to install solar panels on our roofs so that we can change the way we live, or change the way we provide our asset servicing. And so I think, this is an opportunity to start incrementally deploying the target operating model, since you're replumbing some of the stuff anyways, and also to catch those laggards who are not participating.
And you picked up on the point I was just going to make. If we miss the opportunity in the next 12 months to really drive that harmonization, the interoperability, then we're missing out as an ecosystem, right? And I think what you will see is the calls for that 28 regulatory regime on an opt-in, opt-out basis will just get stronger and stronger, right? We take it up from the country, the CSDs, the FMIs, and really make it an EU block capital markets decision. So I think they're almost leaving it to the industry. Come, harmonise, work together.
Yeah.
But if you're not going to do it, we're going to find another way to make it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And the standardization is really the linchpin.
Yeah.
So to the extent that we can elevate the conversation and harmonize and do that quickly, that's going to be the key to really making this smooth.